Welcome to Cannabis Capitol's Pod Politics. I'm your host, Chris Egger, and thank you for joining us. Tonight is the final episode of the 2022 season, and I am joined to my left by two what I would consider esteemed colleagues as well as thought leaders in the cannabis space. We have Nichole West representing Butter Modern Cannabis, which is a dispensary operator in the city of Santa Ana, soon to be Costa Mesa, and there's a lot more to that we'll get into tonight. And then next to her is Dan Miller, an attorney at large and the cannabis counselor, who has been active in the cannabis space as a legal professional since 2004 and has represented the spectrum of legacy brands into legal and compliant licensed brand entities here in the current era. And so to the two of you, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And so, Nichole, I want to start off by saying your role at Butter is somewhat new. It was new to me when we found out. You know, Nichole has been a regular guest with us. Her history in the cannabis industry has been one of legislative action and as much as professional right endeavors. But there's a new role for you at Butter. So what are you doing there? And tell us a little bit about Butter and what your vision is.
I actually just started about a month ago. I think a month ago tomorrow. It's a COO role, which, to be quite honest, I think I've been doing in almost every job that I've been at. But I just got the title for the first time, which is pretty rad. It's the first time. Thank you. I make the joke, it's the first time that I've not been the vice behind some dumbass president. But for real. So I got this role, I was referred to this role by their counsel because they needed, a strong operator, because when you have so many moving pieces, it's really hard to really understand how they coalesce with one another unless you fully understand the business. And when you're trying to make a vertically integrated business, it becomes really hard to see where one hand is not properly, washing the other, or one hand is not properly handing off that baton, if you will. And so they brought me in to kind of bring the pieces together. And so my main focus right now is to make sure that all of the, different sections of the business are communicating with one another, which I think
so Butter is vertically integrated.
I mean, yes and no. No, they're not, because they have different ownership, which you'll see in a lot of these businesses, right? A lot of these businesses won't have a continuous investor schema, if you will, through all of the businesses. Because, this company started to grow, and then this one started to retail, and then these people came together and did this thing. And so yes and no.
But they united through brand identity?
We have affiliations with products and brands that we're developing. So Butter is making their own brands as well. And I think that's part of the ability to be able to really scale, as well as to be able to have, strong brand presence.
And still control the quality of the products that are going into that scaling.
Yeah. So my main focus at Butter is to get all of the parts of the business to understand what the other parts of the business can do and how much we can actually rely on one another for the different parts. Because I think everyone in this industry is wearing like 35 hats, and early on that was your only option. But I think as we start to, evolve into the industry, we're going to have to be able to put some of those hats on other people's heads and really do one thing very well, or a couple things very well, not 32 things, because that's not for everyone. And my main job is to figure out who's being tasked correctly and train everyone that's not, and
and also keeping that structure and the identity and moving it into, because I understand that. So Butter does operate currently in Santa Ana right now as a dispensary operator, but then in 2023 you guys will be expanding to Costa Mesa as well.
I mean, Costa Mesa is a tricky conversation.
God bless.
I mean, ideally, yes, but Costa Mesa has, played a very almost militaristic hurry up and wait reality of get ready to open and get a business going, and then, oh wait, we're not going to license. Oh, then wait, oh, we licensed a couple people, and so. All
right, so that's where this is the perfect segue into the politics and the agendas tonight. One of the things we're going to talk about is what went right in 2022 and what needs to get, on a different level what we need to focus on in 2023. We just came out of an election cycle, right? And I'd really like to get into that with you. But I'm going to dip over to Dan Miller for a second. And Dan, you started in this business early on. Why don't you just give us a little bit about your practice, the type of clients that you represent, and the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. I got into the space pretty early. Law firms weren't taking cannabis clients back in early 2000s. Couldn't walk into a law firm, hand them a stack of cash, and go through the partnership track and get that vetted. So a lot of my clients came because I was buying weed in the shops and the collectives and starting to talk to shop owners. And for me, I was a fan of the weed, right? I like the flower. I smoke it regularly. So my client base kind of evolved from my friendships in the space. And it was an interesting business back in the day. We started churches, we started nonprofit collectives, we unincorporated business
I'm an ordained
associations.
minister.
Are you?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I wonder if I set up your church back in the day.
No, but yeah.
And weed was a really interesting commodity on how California did it. And now we're into a fully regulated space.
We used to call it the Prop 215 compliant era, right? For those who don't know, before AUMA, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act passed, we operated under Prop 215, right, from 1996 through to 2016 or even 2017, maybe, right?
Right. So you had
The kids call it trap shops now. It's really weird.
I used to say I kept trappers trapping back in the day.
Well, you were a trap shop if you were not registered with Fiona Ma and the Franchise Tax Board and paying at least your sales tax. And by the way, we've had that discussion here. I've always wanted to go back and do an audit and see exactly under that Prop 215 regulatory compliant model where there's a lot more access for cannabis throughout the state of California and a lot more municipalities, right? What the tax revenues from just the sales tax alone was during that era of time. I don't know if it's ever been broken out, and I don't know if enough people were paying it, to be honest with you,
I don't know if enough people were being honest about what they were actually selling, because a lot of people were paying their taxes, but under like a holistic wellness model. And so like if you actually audit it, it's dirty data in, and so dirty data in equals bad data out. So I don't know that you'd actually... Yeah, it's like my church, I didn't actually have a church. They wouldn't let me do it. I didn't actually have a church.
That got
I tried.
you
I did try.
in 2016, but I know since then you've been working with legacy brands, right? Legacy operators. Tell us a little bit about what the now is about, your practice, right?
Well, so the now is getting everybody out of the legacy market into the fully regulated space and is bridging a gap between sophisticated business investors and operators that were operating in a model that they weren't recording their books and records as you would in a traditional business model. So how do we blend these two markets together and not degrade a product that is a good product that needs to be out there? And a lot of it is convincing the public that this isn't a demonized product, right? It's not worse than alcohol. In fact, it's better, hands down, on every aspect. But we need to make that transition. And we need to have the government work with us, not against us. And that's the big problem that California did when they rolled it out. They didn't invite in the legacy operators. Had they done that at the beginning and invited everybody into the regulated space, we would have had a huge difference right now. We wouldn't be fighting the black market like we currently are.
Right, so cool. So this is a perfect segue then to where Nichole was going with her thoughts, right? So Dan, we talked, all right, in this past election cycle, a lot of cities and counties, the unincorporated areas within counties, passed legislation to approve taxes for allowing regulatory cannabis to operate in the city boundaries or the municipal boundaries and the county boundaries. Now, the reason that's relevant is they couldn't do that themselves, but since that has occurred, they're now going to be most likely moving forward with new legislation, right? So Dan, your law practice is based in Huntington Beach, right? And Huntington Beach is one of the big coastal communities, and that's going to allow me, once I get you to kind of give us some insight to what's coming up in Huntington Beach and the timeline that we think we might be expecting, to have Nichole dip into Santa Ana and Costa Mesa and the here and now operators and not so much the distant futures. What's going on in Huntington Beach?
Well, Huntington Beach actually passed a pretty decent tax measure, 6% on retail sales, 1% on all other businesses. Right? They're allowing 10 retail licenses ultimately, city of 200,000 people. It's okay access. And unlimited licenses in all other categories. So what this is going to come down to, like we always talked about, this is now going to be a rental real property game, right? In the short term, can you get a property in a right location? Then we're going to jump the hurdles. So Huntington Beach is saying
And by the way,
September.
you've seen some early looks, you've seen some maps and stuff, but they really haven't gotten into the process of fully outlining their regulations yet.
They proposed their proposed amendment. It's a 2-page document when you finally get to the end of it on where they're going to allow it. City Council is going to vote in January, I think January 13. Show up, tell them that it's a pretty good rule. And they're saying licenses September 2023. I'll believe that when I see it. That's pretty optimistic, but it's a good first step, though.
For me, you know, my experience has been since Santa Ana forward, that's about 2 years. The lag from when, you know, you're acknowledged as being a recipient potentially of one of these things, it can take almost 2 years to get open. And Nichole, that leads directly into what you're talking about with Costa Mesa, right? There's been a lot of chaos there. What went right in Santa Ana and Costa Mesa this year that you can point to, and some stuff that maybe frustrated you?
I can point to a lot more right in Santa Ana than I can probably in most places in cannabis, to be quite honest. As far as, I mean, let's just start with they were first to the gate. You know, they were one of the first ones open and legal here in California, selling to adults. They were very active about that. This year, we have had a few things that are going to be opening up for our next year, one of which is the ability to have lounges in Santa Ana, which will be really exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. All right.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the more exciting things for the tourism board in Santa Ana right now. I don't really know any other reason that you would go visit Santa Ana.
Well, to get stoned at the consumption lounge and
That
go to the
sounds
zoo and then maybe have dinner.
amazing. Yeah. But you know, that's I think a big win. Also, the city of Santa Ana is going to allow for you to have some events and in conjunction with that. So I believe they're allowing for 2 events for retail licenses per year of over 20 people. So if anything less than 20, you know, like a tasting or something like that for the lounges, which I'm very excited about because I think that's going to really help a lot of the southern areas. Because, like, really, you have to go to the desert or to West Hollywood to have a consumption situation. And I think those are by far the best ways for the brands to be able to share and
to
show
be able to
their
have
products.
a communal
Yeah.
experience and
Yeah.
to sample things before you buy for your home consumption, all kinds of.
Yeah, and we also have some tax amendments that are happening, some tax reductions that can happen as long as you're above labor minimums, union labor minimums, or are unionized. You're able to get a tax reduction at retail, which I think is really rad. So as long as you're treating the staff members that you have correctly and, you know, paying a good living wage and or are unionized in doing that as well, they will give you a 2% tax reduction for retail. You have to be current on everything, and there's definitely some fine print. But I think that's probably one of the more exciting things that I've seen in any city. Less taxes, and we can smoke here, like, woo.
Right, so in Santa Ana had a city council shifts and the landscape's shifted over the years, but they're still seemingly supportive of the cannabis professional class and industry in the city.
I mean, very supportive, and, you know, based on the taxes that I see that our one store that is a new store, we've only been open for a year, so we're probably the smallest on the food chain as far as traffic. What the city of Santa Ana gets from us, I would have to say that they're probably very thankful for the cannabis industry.
Right, absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you know, it takes time to get situated and whatnot, but you have your credibility, so you're years into this game,
Yeah,
right? So
Long Beach
you're
has
going to grow
also
it.
been rad too. I think.
Right, and we can't gloss over it. But the city of Long Beach has definitely
Yeah.
been progressive on. Do you think they're going to see consumption lounges in the year ahead?
You know, I was really hopeful that Long Beach would get it because Long Beach is where my heart is. It's how I started in this game. So I was hopeful that Long Beach would, but the way that the council has responded to it so far, I'd say probably not like super soon. But it's definitely something that they're aware of. I think, honestly, this is my most real statement. our mayor lost both of his parents to COVID, and smoking weed and sharing a bunch of shit, I think, is actually not something that he's wrapped his mind
Willing
around.
to prioritize right now.
Yeah,
on a
caring
subconscious
about,
level.
where he's like, yeah, go ahead, get out of here, potheads. And our mayor's really cool. He's been really, really nice, Mayor Robert Garcia. And he was a council member when I first got in the game, and so like, I've got a lot of respect for our mayor. But I also, like I said, his parents passed from COVID.
Politics
so
are human.
I think that's a big factor of why we're not getting prioritized for sure on the weed situation. And he's prioritized a lot of weed stuff. He's not against weed. I think he's probably just not super interested in us passing joints to each other.
And consuming in
Sharing.
in groups, right? And Dan, you're about ready to get talking. I'm going to dip into.
No, I was going to say I think consumption lounges are something we're really going to see in 2023 coming. I think that it's a natural evolution of what the product is designed to. It's a very communal, social product. Being out with a mocktail now, a lot of the lines for the liquid THCs, right? These.
I see that happening.
Going out having a mocktail. And the
I see that
reduction of
happening.
alcohol sales where there's legal cannabis is amazing if you're watching the data. And also watch the data about consumption and driving. I have a college kid, and I would tell her to get with the stoner for your ride home before the guy that's drinking. You will make it home, right? So consumption lounges, to me, again, we got to undemonize these things for the population. And that's up to us as the consumers of the product to really do that.
Okay, so I've heard the struggle in this. So this is a good point. In Las Vegas, policy is different in different areas. They just released 20 licenses for non-retail dispensary affiliated consumption lounges, right? So can the model work without a dispensary model incorporated where people can purchase the cannabis product, then use it in the environment that's designated for consumption?
I was very confused about a non-dispensary consumption model, and I think I've been confused about that. But I mean, I think technically that's how Amsterdam operates because they're only selling you the tea or something. And the way that delivery works, I think that might have a factor as to why that they're not concerned about the ability to get product to a place. And I would assume that there's no rule against a delivery from bringing you weed to said place. So I could see there being...
From my perspective, is that I'm wondering if city officials and people that don't understand, they're looking at it as they don't want the two associated together. I think the two work hand in hand, right? And become cultural destination
when he was talking
attractions.
about drinks, I think that actually has a much higher chance of getting accepted in the mainstream public, edible cannabis in the mainstream public, because it's not going to bother the person next to you. I see that being something that we'll see a lot easier of a push for than the smoking, because the clean, especially in California, because the Clean Air Act, if anybody wants to research what that actually is, that's a fun part to get through. The reality of shared space and a bunch of those other things when we're talking about smoke. So our ability to have these shared space, shared walls, shared everything becomes really difficult in a lot of these situations, and with a lot of the rules that certain cities have for the Clean Air Act.
I really can't wait to see what the entrepreneurs do with these consumption lounges, because we're looking for experiences now. I think more and more people, especially coming out of COVID, we're looking for a place to enjoy a time with our friends or our associates now, and we want to slow down the world. The question is how do you make the money when you're not having table turns like a traditional
And you don't want them to get
retail
too
sales?
high either. You want to have like a good experience for these people. A lot of it's going to be travel. It's like
Sure,
10 milligrams doesn't cost that much, guys. So now what?
Well, and it's going to be education and tourism, because what's too high for someone, and do you have a designated driver in your room equivalent, right? I mean, there are times where I go out and you're going to be smoking joint after joint after joint after joint, and too high, I don't know. Check me at MJ BizCon. I might have been a little too high at the end of some of those sessions, but
For real. But all right, so cool. So Dan, let's get into this. And we were talking about this earlier. It really can lag between the time a city opens up or the mindset opens up. We both know that Huntington Beach, you're laying out the timeline. I'll be addressing it front and center early January. LA County, can you dip into that, Dan, for us a little bit? I know you've represented clients up in the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, different. We have the county of Los Angeles passed a tax, and they have structure in place, and the city of Los Angeles just greenlit 100 new social equity applicants.
And they just got through a challenge at a litigation level, LA City. They were being challenged on whether they could limit their social equity license to people that only lived in the state. So, all of these things are really in flux, right? Every one of these states, if you think you're going to have an easy path through, you have another thing coming for you. So a little plug, if you don't have someone that's working on your team when you're applying for these licenses, make sure you work with one. I see other attorneys in the room. There are a lot of great attorneys in this space, in the cannabis space, right? And we're a small little group in our network. So get one on your team early. We're not hostile to you. We're actually part of your team. That's my only plug for tonight for business.
No, for real. And so, I mean, that means
Best
that over
plug ever. If you don't have a good lawyer, oh my goodness.
Hey, for real,
Holy
his
shit.
shirt that he gave me has his QR code on the back of it. And unlike Shut the Fuck Up that you get from the Pod Brothers, right? He's like, just tell him, can you hit my QR code? And I'm not saying anything else.
Well, that's because I can't remember my own phone number, so you just take a picture on the back now.
But yeah, I mean, the Pod Brothers in law are out there. Dana Cisneros is out there, right? There are a lot of great attorneys in this space who are solo practitioners outside of corporate counsel or in-house counsel. And I think it does behoove anybody who's operating in the regulated space.
Yeah, and I've been a member of the
transitioning from legacy, especially, the value of a good attorney.
Absolutely, and it's not just California. There's the International Cannabis Bar Association I've been a member of for years and years. I mean, there's a lot of education out there. There's a lot of things happening. A lot of people in the room are probably already looking at their tickets for Spanibus. I mean,
so I want you to speak to something really that you and I have been talking about from your legacy background. Properties that worked in that legacy market, are they going to be available for applying for licenses in the future? I mean,
yes, if you meet the zoning requirements. So right now, in all of these ones that just passed taxes, most of these states or cities and counties are going to be at the stage of their zoning amendment stage. Following that will be how they're even going to process their application. So call for me and say, how am I going to apply in Hampton Beach? I'm going to say, I don't know yet. They haven't published that. But where you have properties, where you should be looking, we can start doing the groundwork for that.
so for a property owner that you may have represented through some sort of civil litigation, they may be able to return now, whether it be in LA County or the city of LA or Huntington Beach for that matter, where we've known there's been a lot of operating.
Yeah, in fact, I was mentioning to you earlier, years ago, I built into my settlement agreements with the county of LA that my clients could only do no unlicensed commercial cannabis activity because I knew they were going to allow it at some point.
When the shops were getting shut down through the civil.
Yeah, I represent a lot of property owners that represented or leased to a shop, right? And then the county would come in and sue them for public nuisance, and there would be a settlement, and their property would either be restricted from different types of activities. But now they're going to be able to come back and use those properties for what are really great tenants. These are paying tenants. These are quality tenants that have more security on their property than they've ever had before because the cities make them put in 400 cameras around the place.
All right, so Nichole, I got to ask you, how important is it for more stores to open throughout the state, for more access to come, versus what you're seeing right now in Santa Ana, which is fine-tuning where it is permitted now? I mean, should we be still aggressively championing the idea of initiatives in cities and pushing, or do you see it as we're at a tipping point? I mean, where do you feel we're at in 2022 going into 2023?
More access across the entire state is the only thing that's going to actually save this industry as a business, and as for these business owners and some of these small business owners to become larger business owners. Access is really the only answer. Before this. Here tonight, I looked up on the map because there's a map in the California website about what cities are legal or not, and a good majority of northern inland California is still not legal. Like a lot of it, like an exceptional amount of it. And I know a lot of it's not very populated, but if you have one liquor store, you should for sure have one weed store. And maybe two weed stores. Maybe the liquor store doesn't get as much business, but I think that it is very important for us to make sure that we continue to get access across the entire state. And like I said, that's the only thing that's going to save the industry from it literally imploding on itself because we have products and everyone's fighting for the same. Right now, I want to say there's 850 retail stores in the state of California. When I was living in Colorado, and Colorado has a little under 5 million people, the city of Denver had 245. So I'm going to say disproportionate. Now, that's not to say that Denver, everyone's doing great, but there's definitely still a lot of businesses that are doing quite well and have made a good living for themselves and are continuing to make a great living for themselves. And there's still, some 200 dispensaries, not 250. I think we lost some, but the proportion of population it is drastically different. And I think that's something to consider.
Absolutely. And then you let the operators work it out, and the quality operators,
Survival of the fittest.
the quality growers, right? I've never had a client come in and has not been the master grower, right? But I've had a lot of clients whose grows have failed. So let the
Scale,
market
it's a
work
whole
itself
different
out.
ball game. That's what I always try to remind people too, right? So do you think, Nichole, both of you two, right? But you watch it a little bit more, Nichole. Do you think on a national level, other states are getting it right and we should be learning from them on that level?
Oh my gosh, I don't think anybody's getting it right. I've been watching some things and people are like raving about New York right now. I am waiting for New York to fully shake out. That is going to be the most like indoctrined situation because all of the social equity partners have to partner with the state of New York, and the way that liquor licenses work in like Washington, they're all state-owned liquor businesses, and so you're like your partner, your PIC is the government. Like I am not interested in that. Like I did not sign up for this. Like I barely want to have to have conversations with you guys, like just take the money and like run out of here, like are we good? But I definitely think that so far of every city, state, county, everything, the way that the industry rolled out in Oregon, I'd say was probably one of the more like aggressive rollouts. But their actual interaction with the inspectors and everybody to help you understand what your business is supposed to be, I'd say was probably one of the more quality. They had like an actual training, like you had to go through this class to get your badge to work in the industry. It was the first place that had a class. There's still not anything really like that anywhere else. And I really did like when Maryland came out with their medical program originally. I think their social equity program started out really great, but it shook out bad. And I keep being like really excited for new states that come on, and then like once it actually pans out, I'm like, damn, this sucks. But I think honestly, the city of Long Beach, and I know again I'm biased, but we were early to the gate. 5.87, 2009. We were the first ones. State of California. Boom, we're gonna sell weed. And then we got a Supreme Court ruling that was like, that's fucked up. And then we're like, oh, maybe we're not gonna sell weed. And so then we like pretended like we weren't for a while. And then I moved away. I moved to Colorado, and I was like, fuck this place, I'm out. And then they were like, all right, we're gonna do this again. Right, when the new regulations came for medical. So then they came back and they came in with the unions as their buddies in the process because Long Beach is a union place. And they set up and they showed up and they have areas in Long Beach where it's just like, yeah, no, you'll get a license here, just apply. As long as you do it correctly in these zones, you can grow weed here, you can manufacture here. They've made it so accessible to be a business in the city of Long Beach. The inspections and the process of business and planning code's kind of a pain in the ass, but I think that's the case in every city, to be quite honest. I haven't seen a city that's like, oh yeah, that's great, that roof's amazing.
Right. Well, and
I'd
we've
say Long
talked about
Beach.
it. I mean, from the industry perspective, one of the goals in 2023 will be realigning forces for the common ground approach. You and I both know there was a number of initiatives that were put forth, citizen qualified initiatives that didn't have the same kind of unified common ground industry grassroots support because they were kind of crafted and qualified by two very specific dispensary operators, right? That being said, right, I want to dip in, if we can, for a second here. We talk about the federal electoral landscape. There's a lot that went on here in the country on a national level. It had nothing to do with cannabis and the voting of it other than the personalities. But unfortunately, as much as there was a promise of potential for a lame duck session action on safe banking and what they were starting to call Safe Banking Plus, it's looking like we're going yet another year into 2023 without any movement from the federal regulatory level, specifically in the financial side and specifically in the national legalization movement. So, Dan, since you have some experience as an attorney, and I'm going to dip over to Nichole from more of the operator's perspective, but what do you think is there a plus or a minus to Safe Banking Plus, and what do you see it happening in 2023 if we don't get this done in the next few days, which I'm assuming is not going to happen?
Yeah, I don't see us getting it done in the next few days, unfortunately. We do need to have a banking solution, clearly. I mean, it's a major problem. It's been a major problem, and it's crazy to me that we haven't solved it yet. We have more than... How many states have either recreational or legal now? It's over 26. We have more than half of the states.
I believe it's 21 for adult use and something like 39 for medical.
So we have the horsepower in both the House and the Senate. So again, this is really up to the people to make sure this becomes a priority for the next year. And this goes across Republican Party line, Democrats. And I am surprised that we don't see one of these parties grab on and just take complete control of the cannabis coalition that would show up to really put forth a solution that is out there.
And we'd have to be organized. We'd have to not be fighting with each other. We'd have to not be trying to bring each other down rather than lift each other up. And we'd have to be at a place where there was actually money to go towards lobbying to be able to do this correctly. But in all frankness, how are we going to even really wrap our heads around safe banking when it's still federally illegal? Without descheduling this plant, we're just gonna get another weird, fucked up loophole that we're gonna accidentally have to jump through to put ourselves in some sort of other libelous situation where we're gonna have to hire a bunch of these guys to keep us from going to the fucking clink. And I don't want to keep doing that. We have to deschedule this plant. I'm gonna fucking say it till I go blue in the face, and I'm sorry for swearing about it, but we have to deschedule or bust. There's no other options. We have to push for deschedulization. And even if we get Safe Banking Plus, which would be nice, it would be helpful, but let's be real, there is banking options. It sucks, and they're taxing us just like everybody else is taxing us, but we can get banks, and there are banks that are taking our money in cannabis. Everyone knows that's happening. It's not like there aren't banks that are banking us. There's banks in every single state. I've managed to get a bank account with a bank that I'm like, hey, I'm selling weed, right? And they're like, yep. And I'm like, all right, cool, because I can't keep telling you that I'm an herbalist, because that's just halfway true. But in that reality, without deschedulization, we have literally put ourselves into another, and I haven't read the entirety of Safe Banking, but I guarantee you somewhere in there, it's putting us in some sort of other situation that we're gonna have to lie on some other document to get somewhere else.
Yeah, the descheduling is a whole different can of worms, but you're 100% right. We cannot move this from tier 1 to tier 2 and these classifications. We have to treat this as what it is. A plant that we don't need to be afraid of, a product that's always been safe. When we were buying it in the Prop 215
Give it to the ATF, they know how to have fun.
We weren't having people rush to the hospitals, we weren't having mass recall needs, and we need to have those things in place so we can legalize and make this business credible to the rest of the population. But we can't put hurdles in front of it to make it look like we have this dangerous product that we need to deal with. And I think we're getting closer to that. But I still have conversations where I go, wow, I'm still talking about somebody that thinks of this as this horrific plant that's on the same classification of heroin.
It's still living in the Nixonian era of anti-drug legislation that led to the 1970 classification.
A whole nother topic that we can do a show on.
We have to be careful when we're going, and I think about this every day, because I have friends that tell me that are lobbyists, and they tell me the medical angle is the right angle. And then I have other friends that are lobbyists, and they tell me the adult use is the right angle, right? Because we have to really consider, how are we going to talk to the suits? I personally think the conversation with the suits is going to work a lot better in the ATF's hands. Other people want to have the conversation with the suits and be like, look at how many people it helps, which you're 100% right. And I think 99.9% of y'all that think that you're just getting high are using this actually medically. Shh. I don't think we should talk to the government about that as much, because I think that if we're just like, bro, it's fun, like it's like fucking drinking a beer or like smoking a joint, you know? Like, I think we have a better chance of the current people in office hearing that we're like, here's a bunch of tax money, and let's just regulate this like beer. You know what I mean? Like a real regulate like alcohol.
Best practice regulatory compliant businesses providing an adult choice consumer product that we all can agree upon should be.
Yeah, I think
create a whole new regulatory framework.
Well, see, from my perspective, I always kind of felt like,
because if we do medical,
other than
it's
interstate commerce, right? Safe banking coupled with the policy of allowing states with robust regulatory structures to operate with impunity from persecution from, as long as you're in compliance. I always said that was legalization, almost, right? As long as safe banking included 280E as part of the transition, but that goes back to your point, because I don't think it can without legalization.
Not without.
So to function as a business and to normalize our relationship as business, to become the craft beers and the bigger conglomerate type people and the spirits develop. There's so much parallel to the alcohol industry, right? As a cannabis industry. And the culture that exists in that world is kind of like that craft culture, right? It still exists in beer and in spirits and in wines and stuff. So I think there'll be room for the culture to make the jump. But yeah, it's a sad reality that we're still being pushed to the side. So I'm going to ask you, Nichole, do you think as someone who's with a growing, emerging business, right? Got all that raw energy, that new energy, that 21st century vibe in this cannabis culture. Do you see federal or local being more important for you to focus your public affairs and your your professional political activism?
I think, honestly, at this point, it's about 50-50, because I think, obviously, we have to focus in on our local areas in places like Santa Ana, or us pushing forward to try to get Costa Mesa to act more expeditiously, or find other cities to participate on local measures. But at the end of the day, I think I tell people that I think cannabis is like church, and like we have to give tithings, right? And like, I say 10% of our efforts should be given towards the federal legalization of this plant. That is your tithings towards this amazing church that we all get to go to of Canna Gods. Because without that descheduling, we are literally, because of 280E, I tell people, I'm like, yeah, Bitcoin was cool, and then now it's like completely owned by the SEC, so all of that like nobody knows what I'm doing thing is completely gone now. I kind of feel like Safe Banking Plus is that, right? Where now we get all of our money into like all of the mainstream banks, and they're like, but 280E is still a thing, and then they just fucking take all of our money. I think that might be how it actually goes down. But I also am like doomsday, because I've had some really fuck shit happen to me in this business. But I honestly, looking at it, I think that there's not really like a solid solution without federal legalization. So I think it's 50-50. We have to be working locally to get these things and these measures going. But at the same time, I think the more federal movement happens, the more local will start to happen on its own, and we won't need to do as much of that.
And Dan, do you agree, or what's your position on the mix?
Where I'm focusing my time, it's really good causes, good clients, and at both levels, because we really do need the federal government to make it so we can have all of these great state operators start crossing the state lines.
That's right. You've told me that you have a client that's a former
commerce.
legacy brand that's looking to move into a MSO, multi-state operator.
Everybody wants to go, and a lot of these brands have great intellectual property that they developed years ago, right? That we were able to patent or put a hat into sale, and it's logos. You're going to see article in High Times a few weeks ago about Runts, right? An old quote unquote legacy trap brand that is now coming back to life. We're seeing it with Dank. Right? Dank Vapes is coming back. So we're seeing a lot of these legacy brands that are known, and they're going to come back. And how do we get them back in a spot that is safe for them and safe for the public to trust that product? And
Right. Now, Nichole, if you could open up a market right now just by waving your magic wand, right? Are there cities that you think should really be moving this agenda forward that aren't? And just out of curiosity, if you had any places where you think you'd like to see this industry migrate?
I think San Diego's finally starting to come around, but there is definitely a lot of really amazing coastal places that I think need to get on board. Like the idea of things being really beautiful and being able to smoke weed at the same time, I think is rad. And so I think there's a lot of Laguna, La Jolla, Carlsbad. I think a lot of those, San Diego coastal, like, because San Diego has, like, in the more, like, industrial areas, and, like, Vista has it now, but I think coastal, as well as coastal Los Angeles, because really Venice is the only coastal Los Angeles.
Yeah, Santa Monica
Malibu
passed
has
their
like
tax.
that. Santa Monica just passed their tax.
May go in that
which would be
direction, right?
rad. But also, I just don't really like go to Santa Monica that much. But like Redondo, Hermosa, like all those spots need like the fun spots.
There's going to be nothing fun about cannabis the way it was written in Redondo Beach and passed, right? So we know that the citizen initiative by the famous, the infamous, the love.
And we need to make sure our rural communities have access to it too, because you go out into Kern and you have not the
Kern
population.
County and Bakersfield is a major city that's
absolutely horrible to not be able to get weed out there. That's a desert.
Oh,
right?
I thought you wanted to know where I would put a spot. Yeah, he's right.
But that's okay.
I want to go hang out on the beach.
But you know what? I'll be telling you right now.
I get to live at the beach, so I get to party there all the time.
I believe that Bakersfield would be a great market. Right, and I have friends up in that neck of the woods. Right, I've driven out there. There's some beautiful areas out. There's a lot of nature up in that way.
But the map on northern, eastern California was pretty much all red. Like all of those areas.
Just go back to when we passed Prop 64. Look at the voting breakdown. Anywhere that was over 50%, which was practically all
changed,
of California,
They're starting
should have access to weed.
Has that changed in mindset? Because Redondo Beach was one of those towns, and it defeated the citizen initiative. However, I was just saying, it was a polarizing figure leading that, right? And it definitely was not friendly in any means of what so have you. But they did pass something, right? So there should be a couple of stores opening on Redondo Beach at some point.
There should be, and that'll be nice. And like, for me, I really feel like places that tourism already exists, I think that those places should all have weed. I feel like you shouldn't have to leave the town that you like went on vacation to California, and I feel like our tourism board should be more active to help us with that. And I know that sounds really weird, but I don't think it's that weird, because I think Thailand is about to spend a gang of money on their tourism for weed, and I think that we're missing the mark on the reality of how much people want to come to California and smoke good California weed in a beautiful California place.
Coming. And there are actually people hosting tourism and travel events that are focused on taking you around now to different grows and different dispensaries.
Yeah.
So I think that is coming. But you're right. The state needs to embrace this.
No, but the state's tourism board.
100%.
All right, so let's talk about that then, because is Huntington Beach a dream come true for you? There are other cities you'd like to see it come to, and more importantly, tourism is part of the Huntington Beach consideration, right?
Sure. I mean, all of the beach cities, 100%, right? They're down the coast, up the coast. That's what California is known for. And it fits the culture. Huntington Beach, for me, needs to have a cannabis event permit. It needs to go and have the preeminent festival and sell out every hotel, sell out every restaurant, and show the world that we can have these events in a reasonable, responsible manner.
Huntington Beach?
On the beach.
There's such a better chance that Long Beach will do that than Huntington Beach.
Well, then the state of California.
Smoked too much of this good weed,
but
bro.
here's
no
the beauty of
way.
it. And I'll challenge Huntington Beach to this. Do you want to lose it to the state beach, which is right next door to you, that can grant a permit also, or do you want it on the state beach where you can control the revenue? Right. It's going to come to your city anyway for the restaurants. But Huntington Beach has a problem because State Beach can authorize it.
And for you too, I mean, this is kind of funny, but I just want you to know, I actually worked on the legalization effort with Chad White, my old partners over here from, in 2018, we passed laws out in San Bernardino. I like Bakersfield. I think we need to make a move into the heartland communities that consider, I think cannabis is not something that, it doesn't have demographic boundaries, right? It doesn't have to be urban. As a matter of fact, I know that in Kalinga,
I think it needs to be everywhere.
And the farm and the agribusiness communities, they love it. They want to have it more, and they want to bring it out into the open. So I'm supportive of that. So here's the deal. We're going to get towards the end of the episode right here, and we're going to get into some questions. But the two of you both have a passion for cannabis, and it's real evident, right? So I want to talk to you right now. Nichole, talk to me about the products that you're seeing in the market right now that you like. This is where we're deviating out of the politics. We're going to close the year. We're getting ready to, celebrate New Year's and other holidays with loved ones. What should we be thinking about smoking on? What have you seen this year? What do you think is fresh? And Dan, I'm going to ask you the same question here in a second.
So I've become a bit of a snob over the years. So I only smoke a few things. I'm very particular. I'm strictly an OG smoker. And there's one, I literally smoke one brand. People are trying to get me off of it, and it's literally like I'm the dude at the table, like prove me wrong. But I smoke True Classic OG like consistently. I will try other products, and I've seen some really great stuff. People don't consistently enough have OG for me to switch, for me to like know that I'll always have the thing that I need, because that's my thing. But also rosin products have been really being a lot better for a lot more reasonable price, and so the ability to afford quality, good rosin. There's a few companies like Kalia is one of the brands that I really love a lot as far as a rosin brand, and they're really quality product, and their price point, like I said, the industry's gotten very competitive, so the price point's reasonable now. There was a point where I don't think I could have afforded Kalia regularly, but then as far as edibles are concerned, I just tried one of the edibles from a product here that you guys have, Shaman. I think it's probably one of the best like texture quality edibles I'd ever had. So I'm gonna try to carry them better if I can.
Right on.
Yeah, I tried it here, so that is.
And they have a lot of people say that their edibles are definitely delicious in terms of flavor profile, not just effect. And after Dan, what about you, man?
Well, you guys saw me smoking on stage, and this was really delicious, and I want to get it right. This was the blue guava from Zadex. It was really tasty. But for me, I smoke flower mostly still. I like the rosin products, and what I smoke on is usually something that a grower is giving me rather than something I'm getting at a shop still. So I'm pretty fortunate in that I get to taste test a lot of
unregulated weed.
a lot of phenome parties, and it's been a good practice area as far as that goes.
I'm kind of a brand whore, but I've been smoking Top Shelf, right? So they have that Wosi Wo. Literally changed my perspective on enjoying getting high again. I also have been smoking Lowell Farms products this year, and I really enjoyed them. I think they're very creative in the way that they present their pre-rolls and whatnot. And then, of course, Wonder Bread, right? Which, by the way, and I like varietal flavors, and I like exotics, and I like all the different stuff. And this is just what's coming across me. It's addicts. I actually have to get into trying some of their product, right?
Yeah, it was delicious. Met them tonight in the room, and really tasty.
But I say that because, listen, guys, cannabis consumers are cannabis voters. We all became cannabis professionals. We have some sort of love for this industry. So it's important to remind ourselves what we got into this and what we enjoy about it, because there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. Right?
So I will say, Christmas is coming up. Make sure you give a cannabis present to your non-cannabis smoking friends. Break the conversation at the dinner table. Buy a pre-roll. Say, what's the difference than this between a bottle of wine? Right? Go buy a nice $40 bottle of wine to take to a party. Go to a store. Go to Butter Santa Ana and get a $40.
I always start with topicals on like the full, like when I'm peer pressuring my friends or people around me to try weed, because I totally peer pressure adults to try weed. I'm gonna be very honest about it. And in like usually in a harm reduction fashion, where I have some friend that like always takes 2 Advils every day or something like that. And I'm like, have you ever thought about this instead? And so I'll get them things and be like, try this. And I feel like topicals, like everyone's willing to like try some lotion, and like everyone, if you're over 35, 5, you for sure have something that hurts. And so like a really good topical is my favorite way to like peer pressure somebody to try weed. Peer pressuring adults.
I think edibles are the worst way.
No,
you could get like high for like 8 hours. You might
tiny
not get
doses.
high for 8 hours later.
Edibles are fine if you get the little tiny dose ones, and it has to be something that you're like very strict on, and it's not too delicious when you first start because you'll eat all of them.
Don't discriminate. Get a little package, a little edible, something topical, something for everybody.
Make it happen. I actually when on the night after Thanksgiving, and my college roommate has a band, right? Like he's had a band continuously for the whatever many years since then. And there was a room full of people, and I just busted out an eighth, and I just said, "We're gonna roll some joints, and if you want to smoke, you want to smoke. You don't want." But it was like opening the bottle of wine or bringing in a 6-pack and just saying, "Hey, does anyone want any?" And it was really well accepted, even by the people who weren't smoking. They're like, "Oh my god!" Like I want to smell it. And like it really normalized it along with that.
I really think those drinks that are bigger drinks with smaller doses are actually really valuable for that. And like we were talking about earlier, I think that's going to be something. Like I know it's not happened yet, and like the papers keep talking about it, but I really do think that the beverage industry is going to be something very big for us to be able to socialize next to our drinking friends that are drinking alcohol.
And also introduce them and destigmatize, I think, and continue to bring it out into that normalcy. All right, so listen, this is what happens when we get towards the end of the program. I like to call it about common ground, and I'm going to give my little closing preamble, but is there anything I didn't ask you about that you would like to cover, right? That you have, a certain amount of a forum right now. Anything I didn't ask, any subject you think it's important that we consider? And Nichole, we'll start with you on that one.
I don't really have anything that I showed up having zero concept of what you're even going to talk about. So,
well, you know what? We always knew that you had that knowledge and the foundation to get into it.
For me, just everybody be a little bit more vocal about the benefits of weed, that it's should be destigmatized, and challenge the people that are still afraid of it, because we need to have the discussion out there, and we need to see everybody in every walk of life using it in a responsible manner.
I will follow up on my tithings, though. Like, we all need to give tithings and encourage those around us to do that. And whether that means that we're giving it to the federal part, if you can't do that and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that, then you need to be mentoring somebody with your tithings, right? If, like, you've got the ability to help put somebody on, you should be doing that. Like, put somebody else on. 10% of your time. Put somebody on or help us legalize this fucking plant. And
I would say, one of the things that I've talked about with John Bayless, who's, the founder of Infused Digital and Cannabis Capitol, and of course with many of the business peers and folks who've been on the stage, I think there needs to be a common ground, organized effort to, at scale, introduce from the entirety, the breadth of the state, local cannabis measures throughout the state. We need to find a way to just get it done, right? To push it forward, to make it happen. That's me personally, right? And I've always, I've talked publicly about this, even as back when Nichole, when you were first early a guest, Smart Leaders for Smart Regulations was an organization that literally launched in February of 2020 and died in March of 2020 with the whole shutdown before we got into it. But I think the industry does need to get that common ground vibe again. It does need to tithe without expectation of siloed purpose, right? It needs to get into that broader, if the rising tide floats all boats in motion. And that
federal legalization?
No, for local
But if you
permits.
Federally legalize,
I understand.
Don't you think it'll
I was
happen?
just saying, from my perspective, one thing I didn't get to talk about, and that's me, right? And I really honestly am going to make it an effort in 2023, right, to push that agenda forward.
How do we get one group that pushes all the cities? Because all the cities have their own agendas. Like, you can't even have one conversation with agriculture department. And
that's part of the genius of the planning, right? And I think it can be done, and I think it was accomplished during AUMA, right? That's how you unify the state, but you have to find a way to make it palatable and also relevant to the zeitgeist of the state in its entirety. And that's just me, though. That's my thing for looking at it. And I do want to say to all of you in the audience tonight, thank you for being here. This is the final episode of 2022. During the course of this year, we've had leaders from across the spectrum of cannabis professionals and advocacy. We've had leaders from many of the organizations like the Long Beach Collective Association, Orange County NORML, the California Minority Alliance. We've had professionals like Nichole West and Dan Miller and others who have given their time and shared their thought leadership and their hopes and their focus and their knowledge of things happening currently in cannabis and on the political sphere. And it's been a great privilege to be the host for that program. So I want to say thank you to John Bayless. I want to thank you, the Cannabis Capitol team, Brian, Matt, of course Cassidy, and Aiden, who's not with us tonight, for doing such a great job and helping produce this fine program. And I want you to know we're going to be back with a vengeance in 2023. I think that consumption lounges will be probably front and center as topics, and also updates from you guys, hopefully in the future of the year as to how things are progressing. But once again, I want to thank Nichole and Dan for joining me, and for you all for being part of the 2022 season finale of Cannabis Capitol's Pop Politics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.